Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, and as Malcolm would say, friends and enemies, it is I, White in the Hill, the Catawba Valley Aboriginal. You're listening to the Chronicles of Chaos. I'm bundled up because we get ready to go outside and it's about to snow out here. And so I need to get some stuff together because this is the Catawba Valley, which includes the foothills of the mountains. And when it snows up here and ices up, there are times I can't get out of my driveway for days. So I need to park my car strategically and take care of some little housekeeping so that I won't be completely immobile until the snow melts. Anyway, good morning. It's Friday, January 18th, 2020. Now, unless this is the only video you've seen of mine, and I don't have a whole hell of a lot of them, but the reason I tend to do these things is to introduce information into the platform that may not be here through other sources. I think the brothers and sisters in the community, I hesitate to call the conscious community because that word's gotten a bad reputation lately for some reason. But the community of thoughtful people, foundational Black Americans, American descendants of slaves, 1865ers, we all know who we are, okay? Basically, Native Black Americans with roots in the plantation culture of the United States of America. That's who I'm talking to. And anybody else that wants to listen. But every now and then I come across something that really hadn't been covered, and so I feel it's my duty as a more to uplift fallen humanity, try to share things with you that you might not find from other sources. What I have here, if you can see, is a document. It's probably backwards. Anyway, it's called All My Slaves, Whether Negroes, Indians, Mustees, or Mulattoes. Now that phrase, all my slaves, whether Negroes, Indian, Mustees, or Mulattoes, was common phraseology in last wills and testaments. When a slave owner wanted to pass on a particular individual as part of his estate. Because remember, there was a time when we were property, our ancestors were property. That was general wording at the beginning of the will. All my slaves, whether Negroes, Indians, peep that, Mustees or mulattoes are just mixes. Mustees, pretty much Black Indian mixed, and mulattoes are white Indian mixed. These were property, so that phrase would usually end with "are hereby bequeathed to so-and-so." And the title of the document starts with that. It says, "Toward a thick description of slave religion." Now, this particular document gives you a great example of how researching in one area can lead to research in another area. Okay. Now, the title of it is Towards a Thick Description of Slave Religion. So what it wants to do is study the religion of the slave on the plantation. It's by Patrick Menzies, 1999. And it starts out describing a young Black musician's conversion to Christianity, and talks about how he was accepted among the Cherokee community. The guy's name is John Moran. He was accepted among the Cherokee community to preach the gospel in the 1700s. Okay? There's a little story about how he was struck dead or whatever and brought back to life, sort of like a Paul on the road to Damascus type bullshit. I wouldn't put a whole lot of faith in it. But What is interesting to me is that it talks about how accepting the Cherokee were of so-called of black people. Now, this thing, the narrative, remember it was written in 1999, it says the Cherokee deer hunter and the African American missionary. Now, you realize that nobody was calling us African Americans in the 1700s or the 1800s, most of the 1900s. This is a term that has been put upon us probably as late as 1989. I'm sure people may have thought of it in some form or fashion for African immigrants that converted or got nationalized, but probably not, because African immigrants, like anybody else in the world except us, have a nationality or an ethnic identity that they identify with. So this is what's called an anachronism. It is a phrase that is out of time. You shouldn't refer to activities going on before the 1980s involving our people as African Americans. We were Black, Negro, colored, indigenous, aboriginals. One or more of those terms. Black, Negro, colored, indigenous, aboriginals. Some say native. That's fine too, but native covers anybody that was born in a particular land. White people in America are natives, technically. Nate, N-A-T, natal, nativity, that all goes back to the conditions or circumstances of your birth. But what it tells you here in the process of trying to give you this information is that, let's see, it gives you some really good information about the relationships between Indians and Africans. And as a matter of fact, what it also tells you is that the chattel slave system was actually started out as enslavement of Indians. Let's put it this way. Here's the description of the gift of salvation. You know, there's an old saying about Africans and Indians as well as white man came here and gave us the Bible and took the land. 10 years later, they had the land, we had the Bible. It says the Indians, this particular point, it's reference 6, the indigenous people, this thing's being privileged, were then informed by the Requiremento. That is a document that was put out by the Pope. It was a requirement. Some, if you listen to Lex Will, King Drop, Comeo, they'll tell you about a document called the Dum Diverses, which was a papal bull, something from the Pope. But this Requiremento was the actual document that they read to the Indians. Keep in mind now, they're coming here speaking Spanish. Indians don't know what the hell they're talking about. They're just watching them. It's just gibberish. But this document is the basis for their legal claim on the land. The document is not really to the Indians so much as to the other colonial powers who would come after them. They staked out territory among these people. Once Columbus came here and figured out they had the natives of the Americas had no defense for their weapons, for their armor, or for the firearms, it was a wrap. It was an absolute wrap. And basically what they told them is that we're coming here and we're going to teach you Christianity. If you don't accept Christianity, you're going to be our slaves. If you do accept Christianity, you're still going to be our slaves, but you'll be better off because you'll go to heaven. which is funny. It's almost hilarious. But also this document, it tells you that the system of the importation of Africans to the United States of America was placed on top or molded into an already existing system of chattel slavery of Indians. I'm going to highlight a few of these things because I don't know, my hotspot must be slow because stuff's not pulling up like it should be. But let me give you the highlights of this particular document. Remember, if you Google all my slaves, whether Indian, musty, mulatto, or whatever, it's going to give you this stuff. WVUEDU.com. All right. And if I remember, I'll put a link in the description. That'll help you out a little bit. But it's a very interesting document. It's not hard to read. And it's full of facts and examples and quotations. It's got 70-something references of the books, the source documents it uses. I've looked at a few of those, and they came out okay. They accepted Christianity, become Christian slaves in exchange for the gift of salvation. If they did not accept the gospel of Christianity, they would still become slaves, but their plight would be much worse. Everywhere that explorers such as Ponce de Leon, Vasquez de Ayllon, and Hernan de Soto went on their explorations throughout the Americas, they carried with them bloodhounds, chains, and iron collars for the acquisition and exportation of Indian slaves. A Cherokee from Oklahoma remembered his father's tale of the Spanish slave trade. Quote, at an early state, the Spanish engaged in the slave trade on this continent, and in doing so kidnapped hundreds of thousands of the Indians from the Atlantic and Gulf Coast to work their mines in the West Indies. No sooner had they set foot on shore near Charleston, South Carolina, than the English set about upon establishing the particular institution of Native American slavery. Seeking the gold that had changed the face of the Spanish Empire, but finding none, the English settlers of the Carolinas quickly seized upon the most abundant and available resource they could attain, the indigenous peoples of the southeastern United States. They became themselves a commodity on the open market, applying the same rhetoric they had used in their genocidal campaign against the heathens and barbarians of Scotland and Ireland. The Carolinians cited Indian savagery and depredations as justification for Indian wars, to dispossess and enslave the Yamasee, the Tuscarora, the Westos, and eventually the Cherokee and the Creek. Okay? True facts. I see I'm about to run out of time, so I'll try to wrap this up quick. I'll just make this part one. It's a very interesting document. I advise all of you to go out and get it. Like I said, when I upload, I'll put a link in the description of the document. And yes, you're getting ready to go and do a little bit of Dane Calloway stuff. Anyway,